The night was calm in Los Angeles, yet the streets were heavy with lights and noise. The city always moved fast, but hidden in the noise were moments that revealed true character. On one such evening, a small film crew was working late on a movie set. Most actors had left. The energy was low, and a young crew member struggled to carry heavy equipment alone. He tried to lift a case bigger than his own body, stumbling under the weight. No one noticed. Everyone was too busy rushing home. His face was red, his arms weak, and his eyes showed a silent cry for help. It was in that quiet moment that a shadow approached. The crew member turned his head and saw Keanu Reeves. Dressed in a simple black jacket, Keanu didn't carry the air of a Hollywood star. There was no arrogance, no distance. Without a word, he bent down, grabbed the other side of the case, and lifted it with ease. The boy froze in shock. "Sir, you don't have to," he tried to speak, but Keanu interrupted gently. "We all get tired. Let's carry it together." His voice was soft, calm, and kind. The two of them walked side by side, carrying the case through the quiet street. The boy's eyes filled with tears, not because of the weight of the equipment, but because someone as famous as Keanu Reeves had chosen to stand beside him. The next morning, the story spread among the crew. Whispers grew into admiration. Some said, "He could have left with the others. He stayed." Others added, "That's Keanu. He never sees himself as above anyone." But what no one knew was that this simple act would soon connect with many. More stories that revealed why the world called him a real-life hero. Keanu single quotes his life was not built on spotlight alone. Behind the scenes, he carried memories of hardship. He had known grief, loss, and pain. Yet he never allowed bitterness to shape him. His past taught him that respect was more valuable than fame. But one day, during a film shoot in New York, he noticed an elderly janitor cleaning the set while everyone else ignored him. The man moved slowly, shoulders bent, hands shaking as he pushed a mop across the floor. Some people even walked past him without saying thank you. Keanu paused. He walked over, took off his gloves, and began helping the man wipe the floor. Everyone gasped, but Keanu didn't look up for attention. He only looked at the janitor and said, "You've been standing longer than I have today. Let me do this part." The old man's eyes widened. "No actor has ever spoken to me like this," he whispered. Moments like this didn't make headlines. At first they were small, almost invisible, yet powerful. They stayed in the hearts of those who witnessed them, but not everyone admired Keanu's ways. There were people in Hollywood who believed kindness was weakness. One producer once told him, "You're too soft, Keanu. Stars need to act like stars. Distance keeps the mystery alive." Keanu only smiled faintly and replied, "Distance might keep mystery alive, but kindness keeps humanity alive." This reply spread quickly. Some laughed at his words. Some rolled their eyes, yet deep inside, even those who mocked him knew there was truth in what he said. Keanu often found himself at crossroads like this. He could have chosen arrogance, like many in his position, but he chose humility every time. And while it sometimes cost him roles or fame, it gave him something far greater, respect that could not be bought. One evening, as he was leaving a theater, a group of fans rushed toward him. Some wanted photos, others just wanted a moment. His security team tried to push them away, but Keanu stopped them. Among the crowd was a little girl holding a notebook. Her hands shook as she tried to reach out. Keanu knelt down to her level, gently took the notebook, and signed it. Then he asked, "How was your day?" Her mother, standing behind, whispered, "She hasn't spoken to anyone since her father passed away last year." The girl looked at Keanu, her lips trembling, and for the first time in months she said, "Thank you." Her mother broke into tears. Strangers around them felt the air change. A simple autograph had become something much more. It had unlocked a voice frozen by grief. That night, as Keanu drove home alone, he thought about the little girl. He realized that his life was not about being in movies alone. It was about the lives he touched without scripts, without cameras. These silent, unplanned moments were shaping his true story, the story of why people everywhere began to call him a real-life hero. This was only the beginning, because what came next would reveal even deeper truths about Keanu Reeves, truths that would test his heart, challenge his strength, and inspire millions around the world. The morning sun rose gently over Los Angeles. But Keanu's thoughts were still with the little girl who had spoken her first words in months. Just by meeting him, that single moment reminded him that fame was not about red carpets or headlines. It was about the unseen ways his actions could heal or change someone's life. Yet he also knew that such moments would not always be easy. A few weeks later, he was invited to a high-profile film event. The place was crowded with stars, journalists, and flashing cameras. Everyone was competing to be noticed, to be remembered. Some actors walked in with designer suits, bodyguards, and an air of superiority. Keanu, however, walked in quietly, wearing a simple black suit, his hair loose, his steps unhurried. He smiled politely, but he didn't push himself into the spotlight. As he walked through the hall, he noticed something that most people ignored. Near the entrance, a young fan was waiting behind the barrier with her brother, who sat in a wheelchair. The boy's face was filled with excitement, but the crowd of photographers kept blocking his view. Each time he tried to raise his small hand, nobody noticed. His sister whispered words of encouragement, but her own face showed sadness. She knew the boy's wish might go unnoticed. Keanu stopped mid-step. While other actors kept walking toward the cameras, he turned around and walked straight to the boy. People were confused at first. The photographers shouted his name, trying to drag him back into the spotlight, but he didn't turn. Instead, he knelt beside the boy in the wheelchair and held his hand firmly. The boy's eyes lit up. "I always wanted to meet you," he whispered. Keanu smiled warmly. "And I'm honored to meet you," he said softly. "What's your name?" the boy answered with pride, and the two shared a brief but powerful conversation. In that moment, the cameras finally caught on. Flashes surrounded them, and suddenly the quiet meeting became the most photographed scene of the night. But for Keanu, none of that mattered. He was not there for the pictures. He was there for the boy. Later, reporters wrote about how Keanu had turned away from fame to focus on kindness. Some praised him, others said he wasted the chance to shine. But those who truly saw understood the deeper truth. He didn't need the spotlight. He became the light for others. The story spread quickly online. Strangers who had never met Keanu felt inspired. Comments filled social media. Some wrote, "This man is proof that goodness still exists." Others said, "In a world where people fight for attention, Keanu reminds us what really matters." But not every moment was filled with praise. In Hollywood, jealousy brewed quietly. Certain people didn't like how Keanu's humble actions stole the hearts of fans. One actor even whispered, "He acts like a saint, but it's just a show." Those words carried bitterness, but Keanu never responded. He knew that if he tried to defend himself, it would only feed their jealousy. Instead, he stayed silent, believing that actions would always speak louder than words. Soon after, another unexpected test came. While filming in a remote location, the crew faced a sudden power cut. Everyone was restless, complaining about the delay. Some stormed off to their trailers, demanding better treatment. But Keanu noticed the local workers struggling to set up backup lights. Instead of sitting back, he rolled up his sleeves and joined them, carrying cables and moving equipment under the dark sky. One of the workers looked at him in disbelief. "Sir, you don't have to do this." Keanu simply replied, "We're all in this together. The faster we work, the sooner everyone can rest." Hours later, when the lights finally returned, the crew was stunned. A Hollywood star had worked side by side with technicians, never once asking for special treatment. For the workers, that night became unforgettable. They told their families, their friends, and soon their stories traveled beyond the film set. As Keanu drove home again after the shoot, he thought about how often life tested him in small ways. He realized these tests weren't just about him, they were about showing others that respect could exist in every situation. Whether in a film, event, or a dark shooting location, he didn't see himself as a hero. He was simply living the lessons that life had taught him. Never look down on others, never forget where you came from, and never let fame blind you to humanity. But little did he know, an even bigger moment was waiting ahead, one that would not only test his humility but also reveal to the entire world why fans would forever call him a real-life hero. This was just the next step in his journey, and what came after would shake the hearts of millions who watched his story unfold. The night was heavy with rain, the streets shining under the glow of headlights. Keanu was returning home after a long day on set. His driver had taken the evening off, so he chose to ride the subway instead of using a private car. To him, the subway was freedom. No flashing cameras, no staged interviews, just people living their everyday lives. As he stepped into the crowded train, many passengers barely noticed him. He wore a plain jacket, his hair damp from the rain, blending into the crowd. A few recognized him but stayed quiet, respecting his space. The train moved slowly, and people held tightly to the poles, some tired from work, others lost in thought. Then, without warning, the train came to a sudden stop. The lights flickered, and the engine groaned. The announcement came through the speakers, shaky and nervous. "We are experiencing a power failure. Please remain calm." Panic began to spread among passengers. Children cried, some people shouted, and the air grew tense. Keanu looked around and noticed an elderly woman standing unsteadily, gripping a pole with trembling hands. Without hesitation, he stood up and guided her gently into his seat. "Please, sit," he said softly, offering a reassuring smile. She nodded, her fear easing slightly. Nearby, a young man tried to calm his little sister, who was crying in the dark. Keanu took out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and began telling her a lighthearted story about a brave knight who found his way through the darkness. His calm voice cut through the panic, and slowly, people began to relax. After a few minutes, Keanu stood up and spoke to the entire carriage. "It's going to be all right. We'll be moving soon. Let's look out for each other until then." His tone was steady, not commanding, but filled with quiet confidence. His words changed the atmosphere. Strangers who had been silent began offering comfort to one another. Someone shared water, another offered snacks from their bag. People who never spoke to each other before that night found themselves united. Finally, after nearly half an hour, the train's power returned and the journey continued. When they reached the station, passengers stepped off, still shaken but calmer than before. Many turned to thank the man who had helped turn fear into calm. Some gasped when they realized it was Keanu Reeves. A woman whispered to her husband, "He didn't just act like a hero on screen, he was one tonight." The story of that subway ride spread quickly through social media. Passengers shared their experiences, telling the world how Keanu's quiet leadership had kept chaos from taking over. News outlets picked up the story, calling it another proof of why fans believed he was a real-life hero. But not all stories were shared online. Some moments of his kindness remained unseen, hidden in the private corners of life. Keanu never spoke about them, never sought credit. For him, kindness was not a performance, it was who he was. Still, life was preparing something even bigger. The tests he had faced so far were powerful, but what awaited him next would carry more weight than any subway ride or film set. It would be an event that touched not just a handful of strangers, but an entire community. And when it happened, the world would witness a side of Keanu Reeves that even his biggest fans had never seen before. This next chapter of his journey would prove, without question, why people everywhere called him the real-life hero. Now write Part 5. ChatGPT said. The sun was setting over a small neighborhood just outside Los Angeles. The streets were alive with children playing, neighbors chatting, and the soft hum of evening traffic. Keanu was there quietly, visiting a friend who lived in the area. It was the kind of place where people didn't expect to see Hollywood stars walking around, yet Keanu blended in as though he belonged. As he left his friend's home, a sudden sound broke the calm, a loud crash, followed by smoke rising from the corner street. People screamed. A delivery truck had lost control and collided with several parked cars. Within seconds, panic filled the air. Keanu's eyes narrowed. Without thinking, he rushed toward the scene. The truck was tilted on its side, its engine smoking, and glass scattered everywhere. Trapped inside was the driver, a young man, his forehead bleeding, struggling to move. Several bystanders stood frozen, unsure what to do. Some held phones, recording. Others shouted for help. Keanu didn't waste a moment. "Call emergency services now," he said firmly to those nearby. Then he climbed up the side of the damaged truck, gripping the sharp edges with his bare hands. The driver looked at him, with fear and pain. "I can't move," he whispered weakly. "You're going to be all right," Keanu replied, his voice steady. "I'm here." He pulled at the crushed door, straining with all his strength. Another man from the crowd joined him, then another, and together they forced it open. Smoke poured out, and the smell of burning fuel spread. People shouted, fearing an explosion. Keanu carefully reached in, pulling the driver out with the help of the others. They laid him gently on the ground, keeping his head steady. "Stay with me," Keanu said, pressing his jacket against the wound to stop the bleeding. Sirens wailed in the distance, and soon paramedics arrived. They took over, rushing the driver into the ambulance. The crowd clapped, not just for the rescue, but for the man who had acted when everyone else stood frozen. Someone in the crowd recognized him and whispered, "That's Keanu Reeves." The words spread quickly, but Keanu only shook his head. "Tonight, it wasn't about who I am," he said softly. "It was about helping when someone needed it." Later that evening, videos of the moment flooded social media. Millions watched as Keanu risked himself to save a stranger. Headlines appeared everywhere: "Keanu Reeves saves driver from accident." "Hollywood star proves once again why fans call him a real hero." But while the world praised him, Keanu avoided interviews. When a reporter tried to ask about the incident, he simply said, "I was just another person there. Anyone could have helped. I just did what I hoped someone would do for me." His humility made the story even more powerful. People didn't just see an actor, they saw a man who placed humanity above fame. That night, as Keanu sat alone at home, his hands still marked from the glass, he thought about how fragile life was. He thought about the driver, about the fear in the crowd, about the way strangers had come together once he acted. He realized something deeper, that maybe being a real-life hero was not about big gestures alone, but about the courage to act in the moment, no matter how simple or how dangerous. Yet his journey was not finished. While the accident had shown the world his bravery, an even more personal test was waiting, one that would challenge not just his strength, but his heart, his patience, and his resilience. And when that test came, it would reveal the truest reason why Keanu Reeves had become a symbol of kindness, respect, and hope for millions across the world. This moment was only the beginning of the greatest lesson his life would share. The night after the accident, Keanu sat quietly on his balcony, looking at the city lights. The air was cool, and the noise of Los Angeles seemed distant. His phone buzzed endlessly with messages, calls, and headlines about what he had done. But Keanu turned the phone face down. He didn't want the attention. In his heart, he knew. The story wasn't about him, it was about the driver who lived, about people who learned that courage still exists in everyday life. Days passed, and the world kept talking. Strangers on the street thanked him, calling him a hero. Fans cheered louder than before. Yet inside, Keanu carried a deeper reflection. He thought of his own struggles, the family he had lost, the pain he had endured, the countless nights of loneliness. He remembered how grief had shaped him, and how he had promised himself never to let pain harden his heart. A week later, he received a letter. It was from the driver he had rescued. The words were shaky, written with effort, but full of gratitude. "You didn't just save my life," it read. "You saved my family from losing me. You reminded me that kindness still lives in this world." Attached was a photo of the man with his young child, both smiling. Keanu's eyes grew wet as he held the paper. It was in that quiet moment that he understood something profound. Being a hero was not about fame, nor about grand acts caught on camera. It was about presence, about choosing kindness even when no one was watching. It was about giving hope when hope seemed lost. His next test came in the most personal way. One evening, he was walking home when he saw a man sitting alone on a curb, his face buried in his hands. The man was homeless, shivering from the cold. Most people passed by without looking, but Keanu stopped. He sat down beside him on the hard pavement. The man looked up in disbelief. "Why are you sitting here?" he asked softly. "Because no one should sit in the dark alone," Keanu replied. He took off his own coat and placed it around the man's shoulders. Then he walked with him to a nearby diner and bought him a warm meal. They spoke for hours, sharing stories not of fame or success, but of hardship, dreams, and survival. The man never forgot that night, he told others, and slowly, his story spread. Joining the countless voices who had witnessed Keanu's compassion. By now, the world had pieced together a truth. Every subway ride, every gentle word, every act of respect, every rescue, it was not luck, not performance. It was the way Keanu Reeves lived his life. Fans began calling him a real-life hero, not because he played brave men on screen, but because, in reality, he was brave enough to stay kind in a world that often forgot kindness. Years later, when asked about the title, Keanu only smiled. "I'm not a hero," he said softly. "I'm just human. And being human means we take care of each other." The crowd listening that day grew silent, reflecting on his words. Many carried them home, repeating them to friends and family. And in that way, his message spread far beyond Hollywood, reaching people across the world. Because sometimes, it isn't the movies that inspire us most. It's the quiet, unseen choices of a man who never forgot the value of humility, resilience, and love. And that is why, to this day, fans everywhere call Keanu Reeves the real-life hero.